Hi, I'm Rigger. This is your Ryan. And today, let's deep dive into the image that sent the fandom into a bit of a tizzy ever since it was shown and has fueled so much discourse for seemingly not very much reason. The quote-unquote summer reflection. And, of course, the weapon too, while we're here. Just to settle the debate, and let's look at it step by step and go over the actual facts of this image to understand what's actually going on. Now, to start, I wondered if I should cover all the obvious bits first and then get into the really interesting stuff, or fulfill my promise on the thumbnail because yes, it's not clickbait, you did indeed all miss something. Something I haven't seen anyone mention. So I guess perhaps it's only fair that I start there. So the main argument against this being summer is that it's a vision of RWBY. Fair enough. And the biggest claim amongst those who believe that is that this is RWBY if she stays in the ever after, or goes on a different path away from being Ruby Rose, something we've seen alluded to in the show. And that is the one thing I can guarantee you this is not. There's basically actual proof for that one. If you want to keep doing mental gymnastics and keep telling yourself it's RWBY, I can't stop you, but it's definitely not RWBY down that path and I can prove it. I mean, this image, I'm just going to tell you, it's summer, but either way, if you want to keep pretending it's RWBY, I can't stop you, but it is not RWBY giving up the Ruby Rose persona and taking a different path. And the proof of that is this. If it was her no longer being Ruby Rose, no longer holding those responsibilities that she feels were put on her by her mother, then why is she wearing her rose emblem in this picture? Because yes, she is. What, you don't see it? Well, allow me to elaborate. So first, when we see the reflection, the shine moves down the blade. So we have to make sure the shine is completely off the image before we take a picture to examine. So I did. Meaning there's nothing in this image that isn't just the reflection. There's no shine or anything like that making the colors change. So now we have a good, clean image. There's no tricks of the light. If you zoom in on this picture, what you'll actually see really close is this odd grey squiggle. See that? Well, it may just be an odd grey squiggle to you, but it's not. It's more than that because it perfectly matches one other thing. I would have already given that away. It's the rose emblem. It is the only place you'll see this exact shape and this exact color. Meaning that this person is wearing the rose emblem front and center on their chest. The exact same rose emblem that RWBY gave away later. So either RWBY is going after it and having reclaimed it, meaning she's not dropping the Ruby Rose persona if this is her, or, putting that aside, more than likely it's Summer, this is her wearing it, before she presumably gave it to RWBY later, which is why we get the whole line about a mother's promise thing later that people for some reason think is fake, but it's not. Almost assuredly it's not, and if you listen to some of the RT behind the scenes interviews.
In chapter 5 with RWBY offering, a mother's promise, which, maybe that won't come back later, I don't know.
So anyway, point is, this is Summer, but even if it's not, that person is definitely wearing the Rose badge, so this is definitely not RWBY if she gave up being Ruby Rose. In fact, if you wanted to, extrapolate these images further, see how one of them, it's a reflection of Alex, as if taking that path will make her become Alex, but the other one is Summer, so taking that path will make her Summer. I think that means that the correct path is not to hang on to Penny's blade and pursue the story that way, but in fact to pick up this other weapon and pursue the story that way, which will actually keep RWBY on her path. The path of the mother before her, the path of the person she decided to follow and model herself after, being that huntress, rather than becoming the next Alex. But we'll get back to that later when we go to the weapon. For now, let's look at the other details of this image. So yeah, the rose emblem that RWBY has moved all over herself in different outfits, including up by her face, is front and center. And then the only bit of evidence that anyone really has that this could be RWBY, and it's very flimsy, is we've never seen Summer wear a choker, which is very lame. But given all of Summer models so far have basically been RWBY stand-ins, we have seen that Summer wears all these styles that RWBY has worn too. So in fact, that would mean it's not that we've never seen Summer wear a choker, therefore this must be RWBY. That would mean that RWBY wearing a choker is just her copying yet another of her mother's fashion choices. And that's pretty much all you've got. Moving swiftly to the others, because why waste time, the hair is of course an exact match for Summer, which it's true, hair can be changed, but if RWBY was shedding the Rose persona, copying her mother's hairstyle exactly would be a weird choice. And it means that rather than accepting an exact match that already exists in the show, we are making the leap that someone else is going to change themselves to become a second exact match for that thing, which is just always less likely and such a leap. After that, people say that there's too much red on this cloak, right? This is clearly RWBY's cloak. Wrong. Once again, if we zoom in and actually look at the details, We see that this is red on white, red up top, white below. Just like RWBY is right now, right? Nope, wrong again. See, RWBY goes from red up top to a base of white where the shoulder would be on this darker white here, and that her cloak is entirely red. This image is not that. This image has red up top, a base of white under where the shoulder would be, and this all-important bright white line here. It is a highlight of material that is sitting above the shoulder, because that is the edge of the hood that is white as well, sitting on top of this lower white here on the shoulder. Once again, who is the only character we've ever seen with a red hood interior and white outside? Yeah, of course, it's Summer again. And you'd have to invent a reason why RWBY has got rid of her signature look and adopted her mother's cloak as well to make this RWBY. Especially rather than just accepting that this is Summer. All she's doing here is simply wearing it differently so more of the interior red shows up top, which of course is something RWBY has done before. She's worn it in different styles around her neck in different volumes, and again, it just isn't as clear with RWBY's because hers is all one color inside and out. There is also one more killer piece of evidence that strongly suggests this is Summer, but before we get to that one at the end, we will just cover all the other little bits of detail in here. Behind the head, it is hard to see detail back there because it's one shade, meaning that this person either has long hair of probably a reddish shade, so it's making a flat color, just like we've seen Summer wearing her hair, or the hood is in fact up, so the red at the back there is actually the consistency from the hood behind the neck, which again, at least one iconic photo of Summer has her hood up, and it's something RWBY does very, 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 very rarely. So either the hood is up or down, it's hard to tell, but other than that, moving on. Next, we have something that doesn't tell us it's Summer, but it doesn't tell us it's RWBY either, and that is these leaves that I've seen everyone call brooches or pins. Again, they're not. Look closely. If you do look closely, you see these metal crossbars and these lines leading from it, these thick lines that lead from the image. It's clearly a belt with a prong, a leaf-shaped prong. The end of a belt is called a prong. Yes, I googled it. She also has two, meaning that this image does not have one brooch, and in fact looks more like this. This one for hood down, or this one for hood up. The belts appear to possibly cross across the chest, and the rose badge sits front and center, or perhaps the rose badge is on the material of the hood at the front, sitting over the top of that. As if it were in fact the rose badge that is being a brooch holding the cloak together at the front. Real quick, just a thought. People are saying this doesn't really fit with Summer, but again, how do you know? And we'll get into later that Summer's theme is very woodsman-y, very foresty in the weapon, so these leaves would actually fit with that theme. Also, I have one crazy idea, which is not true, like it just came across my mind now, but imagine this. Imagine if those were to indicate that she was the previous fall maiden. I know that it's not the case, alright, and I know that the leaves are different, but they are like fall leaves, like they are just like leaves from a tree. And imagine if, because Summer went away and never came back, when the powers appeared in amber, that's when Oz knew that Summer was dead. There you go. That would be confirmation. Just wondering, just putting it out there. But that's speculation. Let's move on to the actual facts of the image. The next question people get is, why are these belts crossed at the front? What is this? The answers that come to my mind is, well, it could be an elaborate different way to hold up one of the Rose family's beloved corset tops, which we've seen belted at the top before, but more likely, I would think, it's something to do with her battle outfit, what she wears when she's actually going on a mission. In fact, it might be something to hold her weapon, possibly behind her back, or something like that. Which makes a lot of sense of why we actually haven't seen it before, if you want in-canon reasons, because the only thing we've seen of her is this photograph where you can't see any of her, and the other times we've seen her has been RWBY's visions of her in her head, where she's standing by what will be her gravesite, and she has no weapons at all, so presumably that's her at home, not out on a mission, not strapped up for combat. Which neatly leads us to talk about the weapon, but before we do that, the other last piece of evidence that tells us this really is most likely Summer is requiring us to open not our eyes, but our ears, because...
RWBY?
Why is a deep female voice calling out to RWBY by name if it was herself? If you saw yourself in the past, would you call out to yourself by name? No. You would be a mother or something calling after your kid. Listen, it's to lead into the fake out where the cat is actually saying her name, but she hears it in a different voice. And before you go and run to the credits to check, that voice is uncredited. It could be one of the voice actors doing the voice. That voice line is not named. It's not in the credits anywhere, but that makes sense if they're hiding it. Which leads me to believe we might soon get a scene or a flashback with Summer, which I'll discuss in a minute, but if she has a voice actress now, or someone has taken up the voice role, makes sense. For some reason, everyone just seemed to ignore that bit, but we'll move on. Now on to what is presumably Summer's weapon. The weapon, I saw people get really quite annoyed at for some reason, and I heard some ridiculous complaints, but let's examine it first. I will say that people saying this could be Crescent Rose in disguise, I agree. In fact, I pretty much strongly agree, but that doesn't mean it's not also her mother's weapon that she's seeing. Why can't it literally be both? It's hiding Crescent Rose in a vision of her mother's weapon. These visions don't mean it's entirely physical and it's actually there. That doesn't mean that anything that Ruby sees is actually there. However, to interpret that if it was Crescent Rose, it makes a lot of sense of what I said earlier, that this would be her picking up her mother's route, picking up her mother's path, picking up being a huntsman and following in those ideals that she initially set out to do. If she sticks with the way she was going, it will become being Alex. But if she were to change, if she were to pick up the weapon that was her mother's, which may in fact be hiding Crescent Rose, that would in fact be her embracing that path and sticking to her ideals that she started out with and that she started in honor of her mother. So in fact, Ruby learning to put down Penny's weapon and in fact take up her mother's weapon might be what we actually want her to do by the end of this, and might be what she has to do by the end of this after wrestling with perhaps some summer memories, which is how we get some insight. Just speculation. But let's look at the weapon itself. It's pretty cool. Big axe, which people have rightly immediately pointed out is like the woodsman from Little Red Riding Hood. Also, notice that it cuts off here, so there's a decent chance it could extend further, perhaps even down as well if there were more room, because the blade seems to telescope in and out. I also see that people might say it has a scythe function, presumably like this, which it may have, and people seemed kinda mad about that, because Ruby is supposed to have made her scythe based on Crow's. Okay, speculation, but remember, Crow and Summer were on a team together, and her adding inspiration from his weapon to hers wouldn't be unreasonable. In fact, thematically, remember that Yang and Ruby were siblings and ended up on the same team but with different partners. If, in a narrative way, that theme is being repeated, it would make sense that the pair of Crow and Raven was split up. When you remember that Ty and Raven got together first, there's a decent chance they might have been partners to start, standing to the logical deduction that there was a good chance that Crow and Summer were partners, meaning that even if Summer did take inspiration from Crow, it's not just a teammate, it would be her partner too. And yes, I mean partner in a combat way before anyone freaks out. Thus, it may also not do this, because there isn't at least an obvious mechanism that would show that it does that. You just think those shapes fit together. It actually seems to go a different way. More on that in a second, but again, even if it did, Ruby's would still be influenced by Crow, especially because he had the added benefit of being alive and around to teach her how to use it. And it would still make Crow's the original scythe of the three, he just influenced and inspired both Summer and Ruby. On top of that, this makes Crescent Rose even better, because what it is then is an exact perfect pairing of her two inspirations, Crow and her mother, because the transforming, techy, overly big scythe comes from Crow, but instead of an alternate melee form and short-range firearm, she instead combined the long-range firearm from her mother's weapon, meaning it is half Crow and half Summer. It's literally a mix of those two, and that makes Ruby, which sounds perfect. That sounds about right to me. So let's also ignore the scythe speculation here for a second and look at the rifle, because if these two sides of the axe telescope back in, which it seems like it might, see how that central plate is sort of sitting in the middle and then everything pops out from it? If you collapse those back in and then that pops into the base here, that turns this into a stock. Then this bit at the top does the same, the stock rotates around this point here, and you get something like this. See, there's this gap here where you can actually see wall, meaning that this handle gets sort of pulled and slides in. There's three different versions here. There's just a little difference where you think the handle might slide into. It's a little hard to predict because it's hard to tell where everything moves to. But it would make something along these lines. It's if you think this gold line of patterning will continue this way, or perhaps this piece up here looks like it might actually slide down to complete that gold line. This little triangle here might slide in around the trigger. It's a bit hard to tell where everything lands. But this is basically it, and it's an alternate weapon mode, which is a hunting rifle, which again fits that woodsman-y or that sort of foresty theme, which again goes with the leaves and goes with her inspiration of the woodsman and the axe, and the warm sort of wooden colours and designs to the whole thing. But also on a personal note, I just like seeing someone with a rifle like this. It just reminds me of Pyrrha, which is kind of cool. Just before we go, I'd like to address something. For everyone complaining about this being Summer's weapon, look, it's a nice headcanon you have there, buddy, but none of that is real. The actual facts we know about Summer are these. Her name was Summer Rose, she is RWBY's mother, RWBY sounds like her when giving speeches, that Crow considers her the best of them, she looks like this, she was a good mom to Yang, and that we know Salem knows who she is. And she went off to a mission one day and never came home. That's it. That's every single thing that we know about Summer at all. Every single other thing you've ever heard or thought of about her and her relationship to others or how she acts or anything is entirely made up and doesn't actually apply. Also, people disappointed by this weapon design? What did you expect? This is a 10-year mystery. Literally nothing they did would ever meet your expectations anyway, so my advice is honestly just get over it. It fits her thematically, and it also fits her being part of RWBY's inspiration, which is actually more important. So, for anyone saying it doesn't fit how you think she'd fight, you don't know anything about her or how she'd fight. The other thing I saw was it doesn't fit her build because it's a brutish, melee, heavy design, and my answer to that is so that's where RWBY inherited it from, huh? Because, come on, remember what show you're watching. That just literally makes them more alike and makes even more sense for this being Summer's weapon. Anyway, my overall advice is just buckle in and enjoy the fun. Also, a fun thought, we might be getting a Summer reveal soon, or a Summer scene, because we have a lot of bit of evidence we needed to get one. Not only is there a silver eyes flash here, which could be leading to a specific thought or moment because we haven't seen that before, but we have her weapon now fully designed, meaning that if we need a scene where Summer's using a weapon, we now know what it is and have solidified it. So it stands to reason they might have finally done that because we might need to see it in a scene with Summer. Add to that, they seem to have finally casted someone for the voice, even though they're not telling us who it is. And she has a more specific design that is more unique and not just like a reskin of RWBY, so that also points to the fact we might be seeing her. And on top of that, remember that in the Volume 9 teaser trailer there is this one out-of-place random shot of Salem? So, while that could be more RWBY going on her mind journey, it could also be because we're about to see something that happened possibly between Salem and Summer. And if you're going to ask how, look at where we are, look at what we've been doing, magic everywhere, you could see anything. So again, her and Salem might have some kind of flashback scene, in which case it would make sense that she has a voice actress, and she has a weapon design, and she has a physical design. So we might have that to look forward to in the very near future. Anyway, again, that's speculation, but at least it's a fun speculation. And that's all for now. Until next time, my name is Rigger, hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I did alright.